now
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06 now. O'Connor and Company here, chugging along this Tuesday morning in the nation's capital. Coming up at 8:05, we're going to speak with Ron Charles. Now, he's a book reporter for the Washington Post, and he's very concerned about all that book banning going on. Sorry, are books banned right now?
No.
There are no books banned, are there? All right. Well, I'm sure he'll clear it up for us. That's coming up at 8:05. I'm Larry O'Connor. That very vocal, mouthy blonde over there is Julie Gunlock. And joining us
to my husband.
Joining us right now, I have, is Jenin Younes. Now, Jenin is with the litigation. She's litigation counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance, and you guys had a huge victory here. But let's sort of lay there. First of all, congratulations on the victory and getting California to rescind this law. Gavin Newsom himself just repealed the law. But let's lay out what this law stated, because it is terrifying that the government in California thought they could get away with this until they met up with you in court, Jenin.
Yeah, well, they so sorry, did you ask what the law said? I didn't get that part.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. So the law prohibited doctors or punished doctors for disseminating to patients false information that misinformation, which is defined as false information that contrary to the contemporary scientific consensus and contradicted by the standard of care or something. The phrase is kind of convoluted. Mm-hmm. So two different standards, neither of standard of care is one that doctors are accustomed to abide by, but contemporary scientific consensus is not. So the whole point of the law, in my opinion, was to scare doctors into, not saying anything that departs from state orthodoxy on COVID-19. This was all about COVID-19, by the way. And it was the law's main proponents were people who really didn't want any dissent from CDC in the state on vaccines, masks, that kind of thing. That's clear from the legislative history. So the purpose of the law was essentially to shut doctors up.
Of course, in the 18th century, the scientific consensus was that leeching was probably the best way to cure somebody from a viral infection or what have you. I mean, scientific consensus changes on an ongoing basis, and it takes maverick doctors to actually step out from the crowd, from the herd, and say, you know what, there's another way to look at this. Maybe we should try a different treatment. The history of the medical profession is replete with that. The last thing we need is some mind-numbed numbskull in a California state legislature to dictate what a doctor can tell their patient.
Right, exactly. And that was actually a point we made. And I mean, we've all seen the consensus change in real time with COVID again and again. First the vaccine stopped transmission, then they didn't. Masks didn't work, then they did. Then
Yeah.
So the idea that you're going to punish doctors for saying things that are against, state orthodoxy on COVID is really kind of shocking. And our doctors talked about that. One of them gave an example. He had been against intubating patients from the beginning of the pandemic, and that was based on his long experience. He's a Stanford ER doctor, his long experience with this kind of thing. He had resisted it. And his patients did better, when they were intubating people in New York and all other parts of the country for the most part, and seeing much higher death rates. It was because he and others like him were not doing that. They were able to say, wait a second, this is actually a bad idea. People are doing better when they're not intubated for the most part. Yeah. And that's how we make progress in science. So the idea that you're going to, cripple doctors by making them scared to do anything that's not what the CDC says at the moment is terrifying.
Well, this law was signed by Gavin Newsom on September 2022. We knew a lot by then. We knew sort of that the sort of prevailing wisdom on COVID was wrong. And so it's just amazing to me that late in the game that this law was passed. But of course, this is California. But I also want you to talk about how this is also a matter of patients' rights. This is really important for patients' rights. Patients have the right to hear from the truth, or at least what their doctor believes is true. And this really would have muzzled doctors from telling their patients good medical advice. So this is really a patient's rights victory as well.
That's right, and that was actually another point that we raised, because the First Amendment also protects the right to receive information.
Yes.
So this was a First Amendment issue. And one of our clients, she felt very passionately about it. She had been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness a few years ago, and she saw a bunch of doctors, didn't really like what they were saying, went to another one, and he had a very different opinion, really in the minority. She followed his advice, and she's alive now because of it. If she had followed the other doctors, she likely wouldn't have been. So, and that was outside of the COVID context, but it provides an example of why this is a patient's rights issue.
So, in a larger sense, listen, congratulations. Thank you for fighting this fight. We need organizations like yours, like the New Civil Liberties Alliance, to fight. I mean, where's the ACLU? The old Civil Liberties Alliance on something like this. They're all in favor of this totalitarian idea that doctors aren't allowed to have a private conversation with their patient about what they think is best for them. But more importantly,
I will say the ACLU has been horrible during the pandemic, but they actually did write an amicus brief in support of us in this case.
Stop being so nice.
Come on. But this speaks large. It goes well beyond COVID-19, and it goes well beyond this idea. The specifics to this case. There is an authoritarian bent here, a lean toward authoritarianism in a legislature dominated by this sort of political ideology personified by Gavin Newsom. The fact that they thought this was just fine is terrifying to me.
Yeah, it is. And they actually just passed another bill that would have favored in custody disputes. It would have favored a parent who affirms the child's gender. Now, Newsom did not sign that. He vetoed it, but the speculation is that it's because he's planning to run for president. He needs to move to the middle, not because he, otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah. Well, and listen, thank you for, like I said, staying on top of this and all. What are there other aspects of this warped ideology with regard to the so-called misinformation that you've got on your radar right now? Because the whole idea of the government deciding what is misinformation or disinformation and stepping in and trying to silence it goes against everything the First Amendment is supposed to be about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I do have another case called Missouri versus Biden, which it was initially brought by the Attorneys General of Louisiana and Missouri. I think the case is very important, if I can say so. But NCLA is representing private plaintiffs in this case, so individuals in this case. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and Martin Kulldorff, who were co-authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. And the sort of crux of that case is that the government has been coercing, pressuring social media companies to silence misinformation about COVID and other topics that the government doesn't like, which is as you stated, is exactly what the First Amendment is designed to protect. So we had a victory in the Fifth Circuit, and it looks like the case is probably headed for the Supreme Court, although there's a little bit of a procedural kerfuffle, so it's a little bit slowed down. But
just on behalf of parents who've been dealing with this, you mentioned the mask mandates. Here in Northern Virginia, parents fought really hard to relieve our children from the sort of face decorations that they were forced to wear. And I think for parents, we're not doctors, and to hear that even doctors were being intimidated, we're being told toe the line, we're being told stay on message, or else. There's something so wonderful to see that the courts are still on our sides, on the side of freedom. And we have some problems in the courts on some issues, but this is a great victory. And I think it really does convey an important message to parents, that they are allowed to ask questions. They are allowed to doubt the sort of, agreed upon message. So I really want to thank you for fighting this good fight.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right. That is Jenin Younes. She's from New Civil Liberties Alliance, and congratulations on this victory, and thanks for staying on top of these things, and to heck with the ACLU.
Thank you for having me.
It's 7:15 WMAL traffic and weather.